Chapter 9. What happened next? Mr. Dumper strode off, clapping his hands and shouting at everyone, while cameras wheeled into position and makeup lady came over. I'll just get the little one ready, she said. He needs makeup? Asked Dad. They're only going to film his backside. That will certainly need makeup, the lady pointed out. I'll powder his skin so it isn't too shiny. Are you suggesting that my son has a shiny bottom? Asked Dad, trying to look miffed while Mum sniggered into her sleeve. No, but he's not Rudolph the red-bottomed reindeer, you know. Just ignore him, Mum told the makeup lady. I went with her to keep an eye on Cheese. He's such an escape artist. Anyhow, we got him all powdered up, which he thought was great. And while that was going on, Miss TP came back and said to Mr. Dumper. Mr. Dumper wanted Tomato to be trialled as well, so she came in for powdering too. And while that was going on, Cheese was taken away to be filmed. Things were happening so fast we didn't know where to look, and it was all so fascinating with the cameras and lighting and people shouting things like take and cut and yelling commands at each other. They filmed Cheese over and over again doing exactly the same thing. Well, it looked like the same thing to me. Then Mr. Dumper asked for Tomato and they began filming her. She was a bit of a handful and kept crawling off in the wrong direction. We were so busy watching her that none of us realised that Cheese had gone missing until Mum suddenly cried out, "Where's my baby? Where's James?" Talk about a mad scramble. We searched everywhere but couldn't find him. Then Dad suddenly gave a shout. Some idiot left the studio door open. He could be anywhere. We stumbled out into the corridor, but there was still no sign of Cheese. My heart was pounding again. One day my baby brother would give me a real heart attack and not just something that felt like one. There he is, cried Mum. Look! Mum was gawping at the big screen outside Studio 6. Dan Crumble was sitting behind his desk, giving out the news. We couldn't see that down in front of his desk, a baby with a bare bottom was crawling past and gurgling. Wet bot, wet bot. Oh no, groaned Dad. Here is the news. Cheese has got a wet bot. This will ruin everything. Before anyone could stop him, Dad went crashing through the studio doors. Put the red lights on, wailed Miss TP. You can't do that. And she hurried after him. Mum looked at me and sat down on a big plush sofa. Come and sit here, Nicholas, she suggested calmly. I think we'll just stay put and watch this little disaster of a soap opera unfolding in front of us. Oh, look, there's a clown in the news studio. Nope, it's not a clown. It's your father. How could I be so mistaken? It was true too. There was Dad striding across the studio floor. While Cheese went scampering beneath Dan Crumble's desk, Miss TP came racing after Dad. He dived under the desk to get Cheese, who somehow managed to scramble up Dan Crumble's legs and onto his lap. Cheese's cheerful face suddenly popped up above the desk, and while down below, Miss TP had grabbed one of Dad's legs and were trying to pull him out from underneath. Hello, said Dan, a bit surprised to find a baby on his lap. Wet bot, cried Cheese. And that is today's news, Dan went on evenly. We have a wet bot situation. This is Dan Crumble, Channel Half News. Good day. Miss TP finally let go of Dad, grabbed Cheese from Dan Crumble's lap and carted him off. Dad crawled out sheepishly from under the desk, pulled a pained face for the camera, stood up and followed her. A moment later, Miss TP burst out of Studio 6 and thrust Cheese back into Mum's arms. You'd better leave, she said stiffly. You've caused quite enough trouble. Mr. Dumpers had to go and lie down with an ice pack. Go on, shoot. I grabbed Tomato and we headed for home. Nobody said a word all the way, apart from Cheese and Tomato, who gurgled and laughed for the whole journey. Mrs. Wobbly Green Jelly to the rescue. Dad's down in the dumps again. He says we can't ever get anything right. The whole world is against us, he told us at breakfast. It's just a bit of bad luck, that's all, said Mum. Dad raised a finger on his hand. 1. We've been dumped by Mr. Dumper. 2. We owe the bank even more money than before. 3. I've got a big purple pimple coming up on my nose. There's something else, Dad, I began. Rubbish has stopped giving milk? This was true. I tried to milk the goat that morning, but she kept putting both her back feet in the milking bucket and looking at me with an expression that seemed to say, no milk today, milk's off. She's probably stopped because she doesn't want any more of her milk blown up. She was still eating everything in sight. In fact, she'd eaten one of Tomato's nappies. It was a clean one. But she wasn't producing any milk, and, to tell you the truth, I was worried. I'd grown very fond of rubbish. Dad buried his head in his hands. Oh, great, he muttered. Now we're all going to die from a yoghurt famine. Don't be so gloomy, said Mum. Let's take a look at her. We went outside and stood in a little circle round rubbish. See if you can spot what's wrong. Have you tried shaking her? Suggested Lancelot. Sometimes one of the bikes gets a blocked carburettor. If you blow down it and give it a shake, it sometimes clears. I don't think you can blow down goats, I said. How about if I put her under one arm and give her a good squeeze, he offered. Granny punched him playfully. You daft cladpole. She's not a pair of bagpipes. A voice drifted across from next door. What's up with her then? It was Mrs. Wobbly Green Jelly. I gave her that name because when I was about 6. It's because she nearly always wears green and she's rather large and wobbly, of course. I quite like her, really. She's not at all like her husband. She stopped giving milk, I told her. Mrs. Tugg leaned on the fence and studied Rubbish carefully. She doesn't look happy, does she? Maybe she's stressed. Stressed? Repeated Dad. Are you crazy? All she has to do is eat all day and sleep all night. How stressful can that be? Huh? I'd love to have a goat's life. Mum smiled. I think that would be a very good idea. We'll leave you out in the back garden all night and day, and every so often we'll throw you a few scraps. Dad's eyes narrowed. Ha ha, he muttered, and he went stamping back indoors. Animals do get stressed, said Mrs. Tugg. Very much like us. People come to me with stress. I give them an aromatherapy and massage session, and they go away all relaxed and happy. Don't think that would work on goats, I said, but what I really, really wanted to say was, why don't you do it on Mr. Tugg? He's the most stressed person in the universe. But of course I didn't say it. Granny did. You should try it on your husband, Granny declared. Mrs. Tugg burst out laughing. She did. She wobbled from top to bottom. Wouldn't touch him, she chuckled. Aromatherapy doesn't work on volcanoes. It might work on a goat, though. No harm in trying, is there? Shall I? I swallowed and nodded, wondering what I'd let myself in for, or rather what I'd let Rubbish in for. 10 minutes later, I found out because Mrs. Tugg took us into her aromatherapy room. It smelled wonderful, a whole mix of different scents like pine forests and flowers and sea breezes. It was cosy and dark too, apart from all the candles. I counted at least 30 twinkling away. Rubbish stood in the dark, looking rather lost and confused. No wonder. I don't suppose she'd ever had aromatherapy before. I stroked her flank and murmured into her ear, It's all right, Rubbish. You're going to have a massage. Now then, said Mrs. Tugg softly. You come here, my beauty. Granny stepped forward. Not you, laughed Mrs. Tugg. I'll do you later if you like. Let's start with the goat. I got Rubbish to lie on her side with Mrs. Tugg, and Mrs. Tugg began to massage her with lavender oil. After about 10 minutes, she rolled Rubbish onto her back and started to massage her stomach. Mr. Tugg appeared in the doorway. What's going on? Shh, we chorused. I don't believe it. You're massaging a goat. You're all bonkers! I suppose it did look odd. Rubbish was on her back, with all 4 legs sticking up in the air and a blissful look in her eyes, while Mrs. Tugg stroked her belly. She spent 15 minutes working away. Then she said we should leave Rubbish to recover for an hour, and after that we could try milking her. I've no idea if it will work, but at least we tried, she said, fixing her gaze on Dad. Dad looked straight back at her. Bonkers, he mouthed silently. But the thing was, an hour later, I got Rubbish back on her feet, took her out to the garden, put the milk bucket beneath her, and worked away with my fingers, and soon her milk was flowing better than ever. Hey, come and look! Even Mrs. Tugg was astonished. I never expected it to work, she confided. I just thought it might help everyone feel a bit better. Dad went across to Mrs. Tugg and gazed happily into her eyes. Mrs. Tugg, you are a magician. If only you could work your magic on that old goat you live with. What old goat? Roared Mr. Tugg, his face appearing over the fence. You are, Dad roared back. I'll get you, yelled Mr. Tugg, trying to clamber over the fence. Heaven knows what would have happened if Mum hadn't come rushing out of the house, shouting at the top of her voice. Come inside quickly. You've got to see this. Hurry. Chapter 11. Cheese does the business. You'll never guess, in 100 years, we've been on telly. Well, not exactly us, just Cheese and Dad. There they were on the news, watched by millions. They were showing the bit where the news was interrupted by Cheese crawling across the floor. Apparently it wasn't the first time they had shown it that day either. There had been so many requests from viewers wanting to see it again, they'd had to show it 4 more times. Cheese and Dad were stars. Not only that, but Mr. Dumper was on the phone almost immediately afterwards. That news item has been such a huge hit, we're going to use the footage for the advert, he told Dad. You and your baby are going to make a lot of money. The hallway was suddenly filled with song. Cheese has got a funny bum, sang Dad. He came swirling into the room, pulled Mum from her chair, and began dancing around. Cheese has got a funny bum, ho-hum, a money bum. So things have turned out all right. I reckon we must be a pretty lucky family. We seem to have lots of problems and we try to solve them. Or at least Dad usually tries to solve them, but he just makes a big mess of everything. And out of that mess comes something useful. Don't ask me how it happens. It just does. Anyhow, Dad has stopped moping about the house and he's even stopped complaining about all the nappies we get through because we now get free dumpers, as many as we want. Dad was going to sell all the animals, but I couldn't bear to part with rubbish, so we're keeping her. Then Mum said she liked the hens and fresh eggs every day, so we're keeping them too. That only left Schumacher the tortoise, and Dad decided he was going to keep him. He's the best security officer we've ever had, claimed Dad. Don't be ridiculous, Ron. OK, Brenda, tell me this. How many break-ins have we had since Schumacher was put in charge of security? None, but exactly, interrupted Dad. Like I said, he's the best security officer we've ever had. Anyhow, now that I'm a TV star, I shall need a bodyguard, and Schumacher is just right for the job. Mum burst out laughing. You mad fool. Fool, cried Tomato. Foo to you too, Dad shouted back. Wet bot, yelled Cheese. Dad stopped in his tracks and eyed Cheese. I cannot believe that you have wet your nappy again. Cheese studied Dad's stern face and carefully, then he screwed his eyes up tight, clenched his little fists, took a deep breath, turned bright red and suddenly exploded with noise. Pooh! Roared Cheese. There you go. That's the end of the story. If you like that one, there are other stories in the series. I can't remember what they're called, but look them up. They're good. Thanks very much.